TVC News, wherever the big news story is happening, we're geared up to break it. TVC News, first with breaking news.
Hello everyone and welcome. It's Friday, 15th January 2021 and it's the Armed Forces Remembrance Day. Our attention again is drawn to the servicemen of the Nigerian Armed Forces, and we choose today to remember and honor the sacrifices of our fallen heroes and the veterans of the First and Second World War, as well as the Nigerian Civil War. We're talking about officers and men who are also engaged in peace support operations across the world. It's also a good time to remember men and women at the forefront keeping internal security in Nigeria, particularly those fighting insurgency, armed banditry and terrorism in northern Nigeria. All right, so let's dive straight into it. I have joining me on phone a senior special advisor to the President on Public Affairs, AJURI, NGELALE. Good morning, Mr. NGELALE. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning to you, my dear brother, and of course, a happy Armed Forces Remembrance Day to you, your organization, and to our viewers. I
wish you the same as well. The Armed Forces Remembrance Day was moved off the Commonwealth calendar. I believe it was initially 11th November to January 15 to commemorate the significance of the Nigerian Civil War. One would think special attention would be given to those who fought in that war. Just last Wednesday, we saw Civil War veterans at the front of the Ministry of Finance building in Abuja protesting what they call non-payment of salary arrears for the past 20 months. You don't think these completely watered down the essence of the commemoration, given the continued role and significance that the Civil War plays in the country's polity?
Thank you very much. Ironically, as you raise this, it's important to note that you have a series of legacy, issues around pensions and debt arrears to various, pensioners from across various organizations. There has never been a greater investment in terms of retiring or settling legacy pension issues across various defunct government organizations or existing government organizations than what has been undertaken by His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari's administration. If you watch the Civil War, not only have we been working very diligently and assiduously on the issues of ensuring that pensioners from the retired pensioners from the armed forces are taken care of, but it was under this administration that even the police officers and officials of even the Biafran side of the Civil War have been settled. So anything that has not been completed in terms of settlement of some of these very, very, very old legacy issues, there's no doubt about the fact that verification processes are ongoing, making sure that the beneficiaries are true beneficiaries, making sure that we are dealing with the individuals who indeed have served this country and making sure that they are paid. It's unfortunate that these things have built up over the decades, but indeed we are tackling it head on and we will continue to.
What makes it even more shocking is the fact that last year, October, the president particularly mentioned in his speech that all of these pensions have been fully paid. I'm going to read an excerpt for you from President of the Ex-Servicemen and Family Welfare Association, Anthony Agbaz. Quote, "We are protesting because of non-payment of our arrears of the minimum wage, which is over 20 months. And there's another payment of security deferment allowance, which is supposed to be paid to all retired soldiers. The other one has to do with the deduction from the pension of medically deferred soldiers who fought in the Nigerian Civil War. Some of us have been receiving pensions for over 40 years, and now they are making deductions from our pensions," end quote. Particularly, I'm concerned about the implication of these on gallant soldiers risking their lives at the forefront as we speak.
Well, first of all, very, very important to note the difference between what you mentioned and then what is actually happening. When you mentioned pensions had not been paid, the issue now is not about pensions that were not paid. It's not about zero payment, right? Meaning that nobody is being, that these individuals are being paid nothing. The issues that had arisen had to do with, as you later mentioned, the adjustment according to minimum wage, the desire on the part of pensioners to say, look, we want our pensions to reflect the changing economic fortunes of not just Nigeria but the world in terms of obviously what we've seen. So now, when you're talking about adjusting, pre-existing pension based on pre-existing parameters, adjusting that to the modern context, then what you're going to deal with, obviously, is a process. These things, it's not a person by person operation. You're talking about a group of pensioners who, of course, have to be their issues have to be addressed in bulk. They are being addressed together. So it's not a manual process. It's something that obviously has to be worked through a system to ensure that every beneficiary who makes such a request or such an act are indeed legitimate beneficiaries. You and I are not strangers to the fact it was under this administration we had been able to really implement properly the IPPIS to the tune of finding well over 50,000 ghost workers in the public, the federal civil service, costing the country over 200 billion naira every single year. So these things have to go through a process. Unfortunately, you want to be able to say that everybody will be addressed tomorrow, but unfortunately, that's not how the process works. Because at the time of lean resources, we also have to make sure that those who are meant to benefit from a process are those who actually benefit from that process, given our history in this regard. So yes. The demands have been made, and of course, the Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget, and National Planning is working assiduously to those demands, just as they have in the past. We have seen several groups of pensioners of various organizations, some defunct, some who have gone to the Federal Ministry of Finance with one request or the other. And over time, over the last 5 years, we've been able to address them one after the other after the other. But it's an ongoing process that was 50, sometimes in some cases 60 years in the making, and it's not something that will go away overnight. But this administration has shown by action, not by word, but by action, that we're ready to meet those demands and meet those challenges head on. Hopefully that brings a measure of comfort to many of them who are counting just a few more years to enjoy this service from government. Only last year, we saw a Nigerian Army general convicted and demoted for complaining about how ill-equipped the soldiers were at the forefront. I understand particularly the military policy that forbids such videos shared on social media, and perhaps the need to also set examples. But do you think that we're paying attention to the details here? The officer in question was commended for his exploit in the fight against Boko Haram only some 4 months before that court-martial. How equipped really, given such an instance, are the Nigerian soldiers who are risking their lives at the forefront, keeping the country's sovereignty? Thank you very much. Well, you know, this is a problem that was something that we have not just had inherited, but that we have dealt with head on. I'm going to give you a very clear example. All of us were in this country when it was unveiled before everybody, how several billions of dollars had been misappropriated away from the procurement of various platforms, various weapons required in the fight against insurgency and the fight against banditry, etc., into the political campaigns of officials from the previous administration, as well as into the business and personal interests of various ex-military officials. That is no longer a secret to Nigerians. So yes, it is absolutely true that in our recent history, this has been an issue. What has happened since then, however, and this is verifiable, is we have seen an unprecedented regime put in place, in which we have seen, of course, the the A-29 Super Tucano jets, 12 of them, assault aircraft coming in from the United States of America. We're talking also for 2017. This year, we're expecting the JF-17 Frontier assault aircraft jointly manufactured between the Pakistani and the Chinese, which is going to dramatically enhance our air-to-surface capabilities with the guided missile systems. You're going to have a more effective reconnaissance, intelligence gathering capability from higher vantage points, etc. But before now, we have 18 new platforms coming in. I'm talking of whether it's assault aircraft or it's attack helicopters coming in just this year alone. We've already been able to procure about 23 over the last few years. My point is, aside from the kind of high-tech procurements that have been made across the Air Force and even for our ground forces, what we have also been able to do on the life of this administration, President Muhammadu Buhari actively and intentionally resuscitated and revived the Defense Industries Corporation of Nigeria, DICON, an organization that once, at the height of its powers in the 1970s, was able to supply our troops with much of the firepower that they required. Creation of light arms, protective equipment, etc. And then from about 1979, approximately from 1979 to about 2015, it had gradually gone into obsolescence. So what we have now under this administration, the president has been able to resuscitate that, massively investing in that. Now, for the first time in decades, we are producing our own light weapons. We are producing our armored personnel carriers in the states we were wholly importing before. We are producing our own unmanned aerial assault vehicles, drones, unmanned, some assault, some are for reconnaissance in Kaduna. All of these things have been put in place under this administration so that we can reduce, number one, our import bill and enhance local capacity to deal, to create solutions to Nigerian problems. So, yes, the problem has been there, but there's no doubt in anybody's mind, I believe, anybody who has dealt with facts and figures and not emotional sentiment, they will know that we have unprecedented progress in terms of our capacity to equip our armed forces under the life of the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari.
Sometimes it's difficult to agree that the military hasn't been well funded in recent times, or perhaps putting it better would be justifying how much money Nigeria or indeed the federal government has spent in this regard. Just recently, Senator Ndume mentioned that no government has implemented the military budget up to 70% except the Buhari administration. According to him, the last budget, I believe it was referring to 2020, was implemented to the tune of 90%. How well justified are all these spendings when you look at it vis-a-vis the current security situation in Nigeria?
Thank you very much, my brother. You know, I think one of the major challenges that we have is we tend to assess security as an all or nothing game, meaning that if it's not a situation where there are zero deaths and perfect security in all parts of the country, it means that you have failed. And I think if you look at public analysis in the country, that's generally the sentiment that you get. And I often ask people, and this is not to undermine legitimate criticism of security response in the country, because there are legitimate criticisms that should be heard and should be taken into account in consideration. But I think oftentimes when you look at the rate of casualties on a day-by-day basis, I'm talking about general insecurity, whether it's criminal elements, robbery, kidnapping, murder, whatever the case may be. If you look at what is, according to population, South Africa that has 40 million citizens, go and look at what their daily death rate is under crime. Look at what the United States, 300 million people, what their daily death rate is by crime. Look at what our daily death rate is in Nigeria with 200 million people, and you'll get a good sense of how our security, in terms of our security situation in the country and the rate of loss, how it stacks up against those countries that we say are so secure, are so perfectly secured and all of that. The point I'm making is this. for us, when you look at the expenditures that have been made, the platforms that have been procured, the resuscitation of DICON, if you let's look at it, I think, from theater by theater, that's probably the best approach to take. Look at the Northeast, where you had a situation where all public secondary schools in Borno State, for example, for over 2 years, were totally suspended. You will not go and see a child in any school in the state over a very long period of time. Those schools are now in full operation across the state. You had a situation where you had multiple local governments like Bruno, Pukawa, Damboa, Konduga, Dikwa, Mapa, Bama, and all of these. All these local governments were under siege. The emirs had been sent out. They were sent out into exile. Their palaces were destroyed. The people were sent into IDP camps across some parts of the northern part of the country, and then neighboring countries in some instances. Now, you have a situation where all of those local governments have been liberated. You've seen over 1 million IDPs resettled under the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari. You've seen the emirs moved from where they were sent into exile back to their local communities, where we have reconstructed their palaces so that they can live with their people who have been resettled. All of these things have happened. So when people say there has been no progress, I always ask, is it based on feeling or is it based on facts and figures? Because if you know what is going on there now, as opposed to what was going on before, you would have no doubt that the expenditures and the procurement of these platforms and the increase in terms of the welfare packages for our armed men and women, that these things have had tangible impact on the ground. Does that mean that we are where we want to be? Of course not. We have a ways to go. But anybody who is saying that we have not made progress in the right direction since 2015 is not telling you the truth.
So the points you're trying to make has been well established by the current press release from the presidency identifying the gains made in the past years, particularly comparing what is happening now with what happened before 2015. In that statement signed by Femi Adesina, we are told that according to the Borno State governor, who should know better, things seem to have gotten better. When you look at communities and local governments where Boko Haram had earlier on, prior to 2015, hoisted flags. We hear news that some of them are even returning back to base. But is there a sense where keeping our gaze on the current situation will keep government pick up the pace in its efforts? For instance, when you think of the gruesome killing of 76 farmers last year, other hundreds of civilians reportedly killed in the outgone year. There is the issue of abduction of schoolboys, incessant attacks, even on the Borno State governor, with its fatalities, among other things. Sometimes Nigerians are more concerned about what's happening now than what happened before 2015.
Thank you very much. So I'm glad you noted several of the points you mentioned in the question. You know, when you take a look at where we are now in terms of in the direction we're headed in, it's extremely important to note that, as you cited, is the governor of Borno State, His Excellency Babagana Umar Zulum, is somebody who is very vocal, and he has, is somebody who does not hold criticism, and he also doesn't hold back the truth as he sees it. And so, when somebody comes out to criticize government or comes out to criticize the work of maybe police or the military or whatever the case may be, when they say that when the same official says that there has been so much improvement from 2015 till now, then you have to take him at his word, just as you take him at his word when he was being critical. And I think that's very, very important. And it's also important to note that we're focused on the Northeast right now when we're talking about improvements and all of that. But I don't think enough attention has been paid to what had happened, for example, in Central. If you recall with me, I remember I was on Channel TV then when there were daily casualties coming from the middle north, the North Central. This is the violent confrontation between farmers and herdsmen. And you were seeing almost on a daily basis, 50 people lost, 120 people lost, 10 people lost almost every single day from 2017 to 2018. It was after this administration put in place operations Safe Haven, Wall Stroke, and Thunder Strike with new bases across the region that we now began to see a very gradual decline in the rate of confrontation and loss in that zone. And now today, everybody is talking about the Northeast and the Northwest predominantly because of the success of what has transpired in the North Central and the fact that the situation there has predominantly stabilized. And I always try to remind our people, these things don't happen by magic wand. They don't happen because we want them to happen or because we just said our prayers. You actually have to do very diligent and hard work. You have to actually create strategic plans that you can effectively operationalize. And that is what this administration has done. A perfect example of that, and you mentioned Sankara, is that under this administration, we had put together, in fact, it was just in January that we put together a new search and rescue, joint combat search and rescue set of special forces that are basically being trained tactically going into situations where you may have a downed helicopter, a downed Air Force personnel in a particularly treacherous situation. You may have a situation where there's a hostage situation unfolding or a kidnapping, an anti-kidnapping operation unfolding. So what we have been able to do is by creating plans and simulating these exercises, it enables us in real time, when things are actually unfolding, to effectively respond. What you saw in Sankara, where the Air Force, in collaboration with other security agencies, effectuated the effective rescue of over 300 boys taken from Sankara. That was not an accident. That was not something we just hoped would happen, and it happened. There's a reason why there were no casualties. There's a reason why nobody was left behind. It was because we quickly and effectively and efficiently went in and resolved the issue, denying it was happening, without pretending like it didn't happen or making excuses. We went after them and we got them out, and we did it because we were able to execute and operationalize these kinds of exercises that we had previously simulated in the event that such a situation were to unfold. And when it unfolded, Nigerians saw the success of the response. I think that not everything is perfect. There's no doubt that there's more to do, but we have come a very long way, and we will continue to move in that direction.
Let's say I agree with you that things have gotten better. I don't know what the position of most Nigerians are, particularly those who live in northern Nigeria and particularly in these places that we have mentioned. But how do you say this to parents of children who are still with the terrorists? For instance, one of the points highlighted in that statement from the presidency is the fact that troops rescued a total of 864 kidnapped victims across the country last year. I mean, that's just for a period in the outgone year. Between you and I, you know that figure is really going to give you an idea of how many more people were abducted and are yet to return to the comfort of their homes as we speak. The situation did not only trouble Nigerians last year, it grew so worrisome that lawmakers at some point called the president to come share with them what his strategies are to ensure that these particular issues are resolved. So I want you to talk to us, especially Nigerians who seem to be feeling the heat of insecurity, what government plan is in the new year.
Thank you very much. So moving ahead now, in addition to everything I've mentioned already, we're also setting up, banditry has obviously become a very prominent issue, not just in Nigeria, but across the West African sub-region in the Sahel. I think a lot of a major point of failure of public analysis generally in the country is the notion that is presented that many of these issues are just Nigerian issues, solely Nigerian problems. When in fact, many of them have their roots in various regional factors and regional conflicts. Right now, my dear brother, if you go to Mali, if you go to Benin Republic, Togo, and even some parts of northern provinces of Ghana, you will hear the stories of individuals, of citizens across the sub-region who are being attacked, who are being assaulted, who are being oppressed by these same forces, these same bandits. And so oftentimes, instead of putting the kind of ethnic and religious coloration that Nigerian kind of analysis tends to put on these kinds of issues, we need to begin to look at these issues the way that other nations look at these issues, which is this is a sub-regional problem that requires a united national response, meaning that the people within this country are not pointing fingers at each other, they are pointing their finger at the bandit, and all of us agree that we're going to collaborate effectively, both the civilian population and, of course, the armed forces, to root out that problem that is threatening our collective peace and security. And that is the only approach that is going to provide the kind of sustainable, long-term solution to these very complex problems that we're facing. I always say, if hypothetically we have a perfect military with perfect training, perfect planning and everything, and our neighboring countries still continue to get it wrong and provide these, whether intentionally or unintentionally by incompetence, these safe havens for Boko Haram to continue to gather, to continue to plan, to continue to rest, when before they now launch these hit and run attacks within Nigeria, before they run back, if they continue to have those safe havens, the Nigerian government will continue to have problems, irrespective of how effective our armed forces are. So for us, we have to ensure that we're not just dealing with our own side of it, making sure that we have the platforms, the planning, the strategy, and the effective operationalization of those strategies, but that we're also keying into a regional master plan to deal with this problem in collaboration, close collaboration with our neighbors, without whom a final solution to these complex issues will not be found. And that is really the reality that is staring all of us in the face. In 2021, in Nigeria, we're setting up two major new bases, Air Force bases. One is going to be in Park, precisely to be able to, expand our security coverage area and reduce response times for a more effective air operations against bandits operating in the Northwest. And then, of course, we have one that we're establishing in Kobe State that's known as Combat Renaissance Group 203. That's going to allow us to place our newly acquired armed drones in that particular facility for easy dispersal in view of threats also in the region. So there are a number of new, not just bases, not just operations, but also platforms to support those operations coming in the 2021 budget. And the last thing I think I would mention very quickly is when we talk about the welfare of our troops, and we're talking about Armed Forces Remembrance Day in Memorial, I think it's also important to note that in the 2021 budget, just a year after achieving about 96% budget execution, then when we say that we have enhanced the salaries, bonuses, allowances, and welfare packages for our armed forces in the 2021 budget, our armed forces know that we mean business because we have shown it over the last several years that our investments, not just in their infrastructure, in their housing, in the weapons they're using, in the certification of their training, but also now in terms of their finances. We're going to ensure that those families who they leave behind to go and defend all of us on the front lines across the theaters in this country, that they have the security of knowing that their loved ones are taken care of, that they are appreciated by this country, and that they will continue to be defended by this country as they go out and risk their lives to defend all of us. What we have to do is we have to support them, we have to pray for them, and we have to encourage them at every opportunity.
We'll get to the issue of military-civilian relations in a moment, but I want us to talk about the huge trust deficit that currently exists between government and its people in this country. Many Nigerians just find it hard to believe if indeed all of these monies earmarked are being used, for the purpose for which they were budgeted. We now know that it is difficult to blow the whistle from within the military with the court-martials that we have seen, and those who have tried talking and speaking out, have been demoted, one way or the other silenced. What do we know about the existing structures that verifies that all of these monies that you have talked about, the budget implementation that we talk about, are actually being used for what they are meant for?
Thank you very much. My dear brother, when you look at for example, if you look at the platforms that we acquire, one of the major elements of what the Nigerian military has been really forced to do over the course of the last 5 years under President Muhammadu Buhari is really work to get in very clear and verifiable terms those things that they say they're spending money on. So, for example, if you say that you're spending money on the Mi-35 attack helicopters, the natural question for a citizen who has learned to distrust government because of decades of failed leadership and diversion and corruption and all the things we know about, naturally the question would be, okay, let me see these Mi-35s. So now you will now see, if you go to the Air Force, the Twitter or the Facebook of the Air Force, for example, you will actually see in the country the arrival of these platforms as they are arriving. We don't hide it. In fact, we don't have to tell our people, this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing. When the President Muhammadu Buhari, for example, executed the deal for the 12 A-29 Super Tucano fighter jets from the United States of America, what did Mr. President do? For the first time, certainly in our modern history, he created government-to-government platforms. These are government-to-government agreements that are struck between governments with the intention of removing totally middlemen who before now were being used to siphon, were being used to steal funds for ex-security officials, ex-presidents, etc. These people have been removed. So now we're dealing government to government. So now we're paying directly from source to the manufacturer in the United States or in Germany or in Russia or in Pakistan or in China. That is the financing mechanism the president has put in place to ensure that these platforms are procured, that they're procured at the best possible price, and they're procured in a way that ensures that there's no money lost along the process. And so anybody who understands these processes that the president has put in place to deal precisely with the threat of what you are referring to when you talk about diversion and corruption and all of these things, I think they would have less concern that is a continued threat, even though they understand that in the history of the country, that has been a major problem. I
have to let you go now, Ajuri, but I wanted to quickly react to this. The president, during his New Year's speech, did mention promise to re-energize and reorganize the security apparatus and personnel of the armed forces. I remember you saying that sacking the service chiefs wasn't the magic wand that will solve all of our problems. Do we know specifically what the president was referring to now?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I think we just saw a major redeployment within the Nigerian military just within the last few days. I think most Nigerians who were watching took note of that. Quite a significant reshuffling there. That's on the one end. On the other end, there are obviously, when you see the kinds of new investments that are being made in terms of manpower development, the encouragement of our current armed forces, and also the engagement of new recruits. This is all part of the process of construction. And I think any further steps that will be taken in daylight. This is a President Muhammadu Buhari, who believes that sunlight is the best disinfectant, meaning that when you open up processes for public scrutiny, then that is going to increase the confidence of Nigerians in that process. So we will continue to be transparent. I think the question you just asked about a particular army official that said something on camera and was court-martialed and all of that, I think it's extremely important, my brother, that when such examples are raised, we understand the difference between having a situation where we're open about whatever weak point can be strengthened, and having a situation where very strategic information that is not being released through the enemy camp and to the public are released. In such a situation, officers undertake certain responsibilities, certain agreements to ensure that such information is safe. If somebody in the CIA comes out with information that is classified, whether by accident or by intention, you should be very, very sure that that person will also deal with the consequence of breaching the oath.
I'm afraid that, Ajuri, we have to leave now. I must say a big thank you. Happy Armed Forces Remembrance Day to you, and thank you for sharing your thoughts on the program this morning. Senior Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs, AJURI NGELALE, are talking to us live on the phone.
God bless you. Thank you for having me.
We'll take a break now. When we return, we'll be talking to Group Captain Sadiq Garba, who is joining us live from our Abuja studio as we talk about efforts of government in this light. Stay with us.
Join me, Precious Amayo, as I bring you news from the epicenter, where it happens and when it happens, staying on top of every breaking story, minute by minute, right at the hour where the city gets busy and just before it sleeps. We're live from every angle with objective insight and analysis. TVC News, first with breaking news.
At TVC News, wherever the big news story is happening, we're geared up to break it. TVC News, first with breaking news.
Welcome back. Let's begin the second half with a packet report by our defense correspondent, Stephen Esen, on the Armed Forces Remembrance Day.
The Armed Forces Remembrance Day celebration is an annual event organized to honor members of the Nigerian Armed Forces and its veterans. It also marks the end of the Civil War. Events are held at the federal, state, and local levels with focus on improving the welfare of ex-service personnel and members of their families. The peak of the ceremony is the laying of wreath at the cenotaph in memory of military personnel who paid the supreme price. For ex-service personnel, the best way to immortalize their fallen colleagues is by giving sufficient attention to the welfare of serving personnel and the families left behind by those that paid the ultimate price. ABIODUN, DUROWAIYE-HERBERTS, and Awal Aliu are military veterans.
He enlisted into the Nigerian Navy in 1984, and then after some years, for more than close to 2 decades, I served on in various ships and establishments.
Even before me, my father was also a soldier. He was a Civil War veteran. He was part of so many international engagements. So I was born and brought up in the military barracks. I was also lucky to have gotten married to a soldier's daughter. Her father was also a soldier. And I have 2 of my sons in the army as I speak to you right now.
They are concerned that although there is a marginal improvement in the welfare of veterans, it's still a far cry from what is obtainable in other climes.
A lot of our needs and wants have not been actualized. We are still in various needs compared to other nations' veterans.
On Wednesday, ex-service personnel staged a protest in front of the Ministry of Finance in the metropolis of Abuja.
What we see in Nigeria is veteran protesting, asking for his right to be paid. When in other countries, they get to, the authority follow you to where you are and ask you, how are you feeling?
We want to appeal to Mr. President to please look into this plight, hasten the approval or assenting the chart and the committee report on debarment and other welfare matters that is before him, so that we will also be happy and we will live to benefit from the struggles we have made for this country.
The quest for better welfare is what the Nigerian Military Widows Association is out to secure.
It's a place to come together to find succor from the trauma, psychological trauma that we find ourselves into because of, it's not what we really planned for, but widows who come to us unexpected, unprepared, unplanned for.
My consolation is that, like she said, my husband was a very courageous person. He was somebody who loved this country so much. He loved what he was doing, and he died for doing what he was trained to do.
Both women lost their husbands to active service, and ever since, life has taken a different turn.
A lot. I grew up to become a woman with him. So, it's my friend, my father, and my all. Like when he died, so like a dream. I ran into the mortuary to hold him if he can come back to life. But he never came back to life. And I have to face the unknown world. I'm still living in an unknown world. I believe one day I will come back to myself.
Please remember the widows, because most of us, I will tell him to remember us in this in the area of accommodation because the barracks threw us out of the barracks after the death of our husbands.
For these people, the labor of our heroes past shall never be in vain, only if adequate attention is given to improving the well-being of those they left behind. It all boils down to improving their lives or livelihood of serving and ex-service personnel and members of their families. Sifon Essien, TVC News, Abuja.
Thank you, Stephen. Don't forget you can be a part of this conversation via Twitter at TVC News NG. Tag at Nifemi TVC so that I can get all of your comments. Let's bring in a former military officer who is former Deputy Head Security at African Union Commission, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Group Captain Sadiq Rashid will join us live from our Abuja studio. Good morning to you and happy Armed Forces Remembrance Day. You heard me speak with the Senior Special Assistant to the President as regards the welfare of veterans. There are many who are concerned if the Remembrance Day is for fallen heroes, ex-servicemen, or the gallant soldiers who are currently fighting to defend Nigeria's sovereignty. Talk to us about the concerns of some of your colleagues in this regard.
Thank you very much. First, again, I join my former colleagues and the families of the fallen heroes. Very happy and memorable Armed Forces Remembrance Day. Having said that, permit me to say that we are currently celebrating the Armed Forces Remembrance Day on the 15th of January every year. However, historically, it didn't start like that. If you remember, Nigeria being a Commonwealth country, under the British flag, we had Nigerians that fought in the First World War and in the Second World War. But as of that time, Nigeria was not independent, so we didn't have our own military. These gallant men and women fought under the British flag. So as part of the Commonwealth, we used to celebrate this day on the 11th of November each year. This was to commemorate the fact that the First World War ended on the 11th of November 1918. That's when the Allied forces accepted the surrender of the Axis forces. However, after gaining independence, we had our own unfortunate civil war, which started and ended on 15th of January 1970. From that year, the authorities felt that since we've had a military history and unfortunately a civil war on our terrain that saw us killing brothers and sisters from both sides, instead of celebrating on the 11th of November, which is a colonial history, why don't we use our own history? It was from then that we started celebrating this Armed Forces Remembrance Day on the 15th of January, which was the day that the unfortunate civil war ended. Having said that, what is the significance of this celebration? It has several significance. First, the word remembrance. If you look at the word remembrance, it means you are remembering something that is past. In the remembrance aspect, we are remembering all the veterans, men and women, who died. That's why you hear fallen heroes. Fallen heroes. However, apart from the fallen heroes, since in Nigeria we have only one Remembrance Day, it's also a day to celebrate those that are still serving. Our soldiers and men that are in the Northeast, that are in different theaters of operation, that are in armed forces conflict, that in peacekeeping operations all over the world. So in Nigeria, it is a dual purpose. However, all over the world, countries dedicate days on which they celebrate their armed forces for the simple fact that it is generally accepted that serving in the military is a patriotic duty that goes beyond the call of normal duty. So most countries, they have days with various dates which they celebrate these days. In the countries like the US, in fact, they have several days. They have the Armed Forces Remembrance Day, which is to remember fallen heroes, and then they have the Veterans Day, which is to remember anyone who has had the honor of wearing the uniform and has been discharged honorably. But in Nigeria, we have one day. So that is to say, we are remembering both the dead and those that are living and those that are retired. Like you saw the Legion, they take a great part in this occasion. For the citizen, what are you supposed to do in this day? It is a day to show gratitude. It is a show to show recognition of people who sleep in the bush while you sleep in your house. You can celebrate this day simply by praying. If you are a Muslim or a Christian or whatever religion, you can pray for the repose of the souls of those ones that died, and also for the victory of those that are still fighting and wishing that they come back. You could also attend the armed forces parade that are done all over the states as a sign of honor. The least you could do is to buy this emblem, which is here on my listing, for a token of 5 naira, 10 naira, 20 naira, whatever you can afford. You can show your gratitude by buying this emblem. Thirdly, you could also visit any military cemetery that you know. Whether you have a relative or not, you can just go as a sign of honor. In the final analysis, it is a day for those that didn't serve to show respect and appreciation to those that serve. It is also a day for those that are serving to remember their colleagues, their brothers. There's hardly no military officer that you'll ask that doesn't have a friend or a mate that lost his life.
Absolutely, Group Captain.
Of life.
I appreciate your comprehensive response to the initial question. Let us focus very quickly on the people that the fallen heroes left behind. In the preceding report, you saw certain women who belong to the Widows Association talking about their plight after losing their husbands, particularly in accommodation, the fact that they were thrown out of the barracks when that happened. What is the international best practice? Is it a responsibility solely for government, or are there other stakeholders that should be involved in ensuring that these individuals' wives or children are not just left in the outside?
Thank you very much. You talk of international global best practices. Like I said in the first question, all countries, they show appreciation to people who have served. If they are the ones that served are retired, like our Legion there, what the government and even the private sector ought to do is to make sure that their transition into civil life is helped. How do we help that? In many countries, they have preferential treatment for ex-servicemen when they are looking for a job. That is not to say you are lowering the standard, but if there is an engineer, if there's a driver who is a military man and a company is looking for a driver, by virtue of having served and sacrificed his life for the nation, the military driver ought to be given some higher consideration than the other person who didn't serve. If it is for dead soldiers, dead officers, like we saw in the clip there, what the government ought to do is to ensure that those that are left behind, their widows, their children, as much as practicable, are given a support that they would have enjoyed if their breadwinner had been alive. Unfortunately, in the military, we have a tradition. I really cannot remember now because it's been a while I left the military, that after a certain time, after the payment of allowances or whatever benefits that the deceased man has, the military would normally tell the family to leave. I think maybe what we need to do is to review that policy. Maybe increase the time that families, they have to leave, because yes, they say soldier come, unfortunately it sounds immoral or hard-hearted, but they say soldier come, soldier go. Yes, they have to vacate the military, but maybe we should review the time that such widows should stay within the barrack and
we'll get back to that. Group Captain Sadiq Garba Shehu is live in our Abuja studio. We'll work on reconnecting that particular field connection to be able to continue that conversation. There are lots of discussions around this area, particularly the implication of what we currently see as the welfare of these people on those soldiers who are currently fighting the glorious who are fighting rather for the sovereignty of the Nigerian nation. You also have seen some means of protest in the past. Sometime in 2018, the Maiduguri airport was under siege by certain soldiers who were complaining about their posts. But let's turn our attention to the phone lines very quickly. Don't forget that you can also leave your comments on Twitter for us at TVC News NG. Mazi Okorafor was called in from Abia State. Good morning, Mazi.
Good morning, Mr. Nifemi. We thank God today, 51 years after Civil War. So hot. I was expecting by now that the three arrows could have been achieved: reconstruction, rehabilitation, and reconciliation on this issue of war and action. Now, if you go today, my brother, this issue that people are just showing on television, there are people staying at AJURI up to today. Nothing is happening to them. These ex-servicemen, I'm just calling on the government as a matter of urgency to help such people. My brother, you know from Arusi that the bridge that will destroy with Ogunigwe, at least I was one of the Ogunigwe bomb. Thank God for governor of Akwa Ibom, for the construction of that bridge. That was last year. After Civil War, there are a lot of things. And you know that this Civil War has created a lot of problems. That is why you see you have all these communal artists. You ask yourself, I'm just going on the government. The abandoned property, my father owns 102 White House Street, Calabar. Up to today, we don't have access to that building. Government should help us. Every day we hear it, and they are property to square one. Unity, Nigeria. There is no unity on that issue because my father's property has not done in that 102 White House Street. No, even other people's property in River State. The state are quite go cross river. So what do we do? The government should face reality because we are good at talking. Government should see what they can for this abandoned property. Very, very important. We see how people are complaining. People that their husband have not died. There is need for government to look into this. Thank you very much. Have a blessed day.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Don't forget, choose to remember and commend the sacrifices of our fallen heroes, indeed veterans who fought in the First, Second World, and most importantly, the Nigerian Civil War that ended in 1970, and the men and soldiers keeping the peace and support operations across the world, particularly those who are fighting tirelessly to keep internal security in the theater of war, fighting insurgency, fighting terrorism, and other forms of armed banditry in northern Nigeria. A big thank you to Group Captain Sadiq Garba. We apologize for that terrible network. As a former military officer, former Department Head Security at African Union Commission, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. He now practices private security and defense consultancy. Earlier, we also spoke with AJURI NGELALE, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs. Happy Armed Forces Remembrance Day to you, and don't forget to show some act of kindness to that gallant soldier that you see today. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. Do have a great weekend.
At TVC News, wherever the big news story is happening, we're geared up to break it. TVC News, first with breaking news.